So how do you set one up? Well, step number one is you got to decide, where am I going to set it up? Where am I going to structure this? LLCs, it stands for Limited Liability Company, and it's a creature of state law. It's not a federal designation. There's not even a tax designation for it. In other words, there's no such thing as an LLC IRS form. You actually get to pick how you want it to be treated by the IRS. But from a state standpoint, you have basically 50 flavors, and there are differences amongst the different states. Now, I'm one of those guys that's going to say, hey, while I love looking at different states like Wyoming and using them for specific purposes that suit my needs and my clients' needs, for real estate, chances are you're going to have that LLC in the state where that piece of real estate is located. Now, I just burned that one down, but pretend it's a nice piece of real estate. You bought a nice rental property, and you're more than likely going to be setting up that LLC in that jurisdiction. Now, there are people that will tell you, hey, let's set it up in Wyoming and foreign file it in that jurisdiction. And I'm going to say I'm not going to agree 99% of the time on that, because it's not really going to help you. When you're local and that property is in that particular state, they're going to use that state law to comply. So like, even if you foreign file a Wyoming entity, for purposes of the liability, we're using that particular state law, not Wyoming, because it's foreign filed as doing business in that state. You're still subject to that state's laws. So I'm not going to generally say, let's set it up in Wyoming and foreign file it. What I would say is, let's set up a LLC in that jurisdiction where that property is held, and maybe we have that LLC owned by a Wyoming LLC. That's a second step. Like if you want to really get technical, what we could do is have this LLC owned by a holding LLC in Wyoming, if you have enough properties. You know, I wouldn't do that with one property. More than likely, I would just set it up and have that single property isolated. Because if it's just one property, it depends on the value, depends on what other assets you have, it depends on whether you're in a litigious profession. You know, like for example, if you're a surgeon, then maybe we're going to put that in there earlier than if you just had a regular W-2 job and didn't have a ton of other assets, but you were just, starting off as an investor. But at the end of the day, you want to keep it fairly simple. So that's number one, is where do we want to set it up? Once you determine, hey, I have a property, let's say it's in Indiana. Okay, then I'm going to set up an Indiana LLC. That's step number one. So you want to make sure that you have operating agreement, books and records. I would say that most of the time you want to have separate banking. There are situations where you don't need it. If you have a structure like this, for example, it may be enough to have a holding entity that has the banking account, but you want to have it something that is not going straight into your personal bank account. You need to have a buffer bank account. So you want to make sure that the banking is separate. You want to make sure that you're tracking your deductions and that you're keeping track of, here's the repairs and expenses associated with that property, separate from all of your other assets. In other words, if your checking account that you use to buy your groceries is the same account where you're covering repairs and any expenses associated with that rental property, you're probably going to have an issue. Because you've ignored the entity, there's a good chance the court might say, you ignore it, I'm going to ignore it. And we don't want that, right? We want to make sure that that LLC is recognized. And then you keep annual compliance. And what does annual compliance mean? It means paying the Secretary of State if you have to. Not all states require annual payments, but most do. So you want to make sure that you keep it in compliance. You're letting them know who the manager is or member, depending on how you structure that LLC. And again, if you have questions on this, because this is going to trip some of you guys up. There's member-managed LLCs. There's manager-managed LLCs. What's appropriate for you? It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I would just type in consult down below. We also have a free tax and asset protection class just multiple times during the month, almost always on Saturdays. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes so that if you want to attend a free one-day event, and this is a full day where we're going into all of the nuances of why you set up a structure, the way you set it up, and how to set it up, that you can go ahead and click on that and join us for that. That's absolutely free. It's called the Tax and Asset Protection Workshop. Anderson's been teaching it for over 25 years. It's a great place to start, and you can go and get that for free right now, or you can do a consult, whichever one works for you. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can. So we set this puppy up. We have an operating agreement now separate for it. We have books and records that we're keeping. We're maintaining our compliance on an annual basis. We're making sure that we're letting the state know here's who's in charge of this thing and paying its state fee. We're doing everything that we need to. We're tracking its deductions separately. We're doing everything we need to now to keep that separate, and that's what you do. Now, I know, again, I said 3 steps to setting this up. What's number 1? Find out what jurisdiction. What's step number 2 is make sure that the property is transferred, that the feds know what this is, that there's an LLC, and that it's filed with the state. Number 3 is make sure that you're compliant, and compliance means giving it a body. So the operating agreement, books and records, banking, make sure that you're tracking your expenses separately, and make sure that you're keeping it compliant. You do those 3 things, you're going to be good as gold. And if you fall short on any of those, it may not be fatal, but you want to make sure that you're doing your best to keep it compliant. And again, if you want to talk to somebody, just write consult down below and we'll send you a link so you can set up a complimentary consultation with somebody at Anderson so that we can make sure that your LLC is set up appropriately and answer your questions and make sure that you're pointed in the right direction, or that we could just handle it for you if you'd prefer that. Guys, if you can like and subscribe, that would really appreciate it. It helps our channel. If you have comments, go ahead and put them down below. If you think I missed something, or if you think that there's something that you want new explained, go ahead and put it down below in the comments and we'll respond to you. And share this with anybody that you believe would benefit. Thanks, guys.